Did one of the jurors misrepresent themselves to get on the Sean Diddy Combs jury? Possibly. Also, you may recall we did a video the other day talking about the jurors speaking out on CNN and saying after they saw Dawn Richard's testimony, the other jurors found her to be unbelievable. And I told you, first of all, you guys are not even allowed to talk about this case. So it made me wonder, when exactly did you guys have that conversation? It's also important to note he's an alternate, so he wasn't a part of the jury deliberations. I don't know what this could mean for Diddy and this trial or an investigation, but we need to talk about it.
Here we go now.
Welcome back to the Kempire channel, your #1 source for pop culture news and music, entertainment, reality TV, and so much more. As always, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on breaking news when we go live or when we upload. So today is the day where Diddy will be back in court for a hearing because he would like for his sentencing to be expedited. When we first reported on the bail hearing that they had when the verdict was read, the judge had decided that the sentencing would happen on October 3rd. Obviously, Diddy would like to get out of jail. His bail was denied yet again because the judge over this case, Aaron Subramanian, said that you guys said during this entire case that he definitely committed domestic violence. Domestic violence is violence. So he is still a threat to society. Diddy remains in detention. The other day when we spoke about one of the jurors doing an interview on CNN, the juror had some interesting things to say about Dawn Richard's testimony. Remember, Dawn Richard's testimony was weeks ago. Here's the interesting thing that he said.
Were there any witnesses that made you think, I don't believe this?
There was one that I think, unanimously we kind of all said like, wow. Like it was almost like watching like TV. It was like.
So what exactly does he mean when he says we unanimously rejected Dawn Richard's testimony? You're not supposed to, part of the instructions, you're not supposed to, as a jury, discuss this matter at all. The first time that the jury, mind you, he is an alternate, so he wasn't even part of deliberations. The first time that they're able to freely talk about this case is during deliberations. This stood out to me when we first talked about it. I was like, what do you mean unanimously? You guys all were sort of like, you didn't believe Dawn Richard. You shouldn't be talking about the case.
It's their way as well.
Were there any witnesses that made you think, I don't believe this?
There was one that I think, unanimously we kind of all said like, wow. Like it was almost like watching like TV. It was like, like when I think her name was Dawn Richard, the one. When she, on cross-examination, I mean, I never saw such a cross-examination. It was very impressive to watch.
What was it about it?
I think just how the defense, got into her and really made her, look very not credible. I mean, I even wrote in my notebook that it was like a takedown.
Really? And that was pretty early on.
And at this particular point, this man is the only juror to do an interview and come out publicly as one of the jurors from the Sean Diddy Combs trial. But that stood out to me when we first talked about a piece of this interview that he did with CNN. Clearly, it was like he was ready to do whatever he could to be on this jury. Our friends over at Inner City Press are also highlighting some other discrepancies amongst this jury.
Okay, here we are, Matthew Russell Lee, Inner City Press, here at the Southern District of New York Courthouse. Today, it's Tuesday, July 8th. Now, on the U.S. vs. Sean Diddy Combs, after his 2 convictions with 3 not guilties, today at 2 p.m., there is a hearing on expediting his sentencing. His bail was denied, but the judge seems committed to move his sentencing up from October 3rd, and I'm assuming that Mark Agnifilo and his other lawyers will be asking for time served when the time comes. Now, meanwhile, so we'll be doing that at 2. Instead of it being by phone, which it could have been, since it's virtual for the lawyers, it'll be in the courthouse. But so will we be. There it is right there, the courthouse. But there's been a development. Early in the trial, in the first week, in fact, before the trial's testimony and even opening statements began, during jury selection, we noticed that one of the prospective jurors said he worked at the UN Office of Counterterrorism. And then he was asked, does that mean you work in any way with U.S. law enforcement? And he said, no. Now, I used to cover the United Nations. In fact, I still do. I write scoops daily about it, but I report on it pretty aggressively. Anyway, I know that office, and they do work with U.S. law enforcement. So it just sort of stuck in my craw that why would this juror be misrepresenting?
But also, shouldn't the prosecution know a piece of that information or have that awareness as well? Just saying.
On the second day, they asked him more about it because it wasn't credible. He said, no, we work only with Interpol and something about the Dushanbe process. Okay, didn't think more about him because he's just an alternate. And he knew he was an alternate. Only one alternate actually made the transition to being on the jury. That was alternate 1, who took the place of juror number 6, who was ousted for misrepresenting, according to the judge, where he lived and the credibility issues raised thereby. Now, alternate 6 went on CNN right after the verdict, and he said, first he said he inflated his importance by saying, no one told us who were the jurors or who were the alternates. That's totally false. He was there, I was there. Anyone that covered the trial heard them say, you are alternate 6. Fine. Then he said that the videos...
It sounds like this juror has a problem with being clear and telling the truth, based on what I'm seeing here.
That no one saw except the jurors and alternates at the time. He said, they were riveting, but also kind of tame. Now, the question was put to him, he said, the prosecution showed videos of Cassie just sitting around. The interviewer then said, you mean the defense? He said, oh yeah, the defense. So then he went out of his way to mention 350 pages of notes, which, to me, call me a cynic, I believe alternate 6 misrepresented to get on the jury, as we reported at the time. And as soon as it was over, somehow was contacted contacted CNN to mention his copious notes, possibly to sell a book. I mean, who am I to say? Who am I to say except to say it's extraordinary to me that this UN... Anyway, we'll have more on this. We've written a story. You can find it.
And shout out to our friends over at Inner City Press. They were covering this story the entire trial as well. Megan Cunha, who's also a journalist, posted in the comment section saying, I wish CNN had followed up with the juror when he said everyone agreed about Richard's cross. As you said, they weren't supposed to be discussing the case. In the comment section, a person says, Megan, in your experience following cases, is it normal for juries to not understand jury charge or judges' instructions? Megan says, I don't know if it's normal, but certainly happens. I covered a trial in Spokane years ago where the jury acquitted, then polling revealed that they were actually split on a guilty verdict, guilty versus not guilty. But they thought if they couldn't decide, it was an automatic NG, not guilty. Ended in a mistrial. I don't know if this either hurts the defense or helps the defense. I think this actually helps the defense in a way if they would like to appeal this. We talked about this with Kirsten Brown a couple of times in regards to why the defense had been trying to trigger a mistrial. It was actually because when they decide to appeal the counts where he was charged, they could use that, specifically when they wrote that 14-page motion to the judge about the issue with juror number 6. So it will be interesting to see whether or not any of this gains legs. Again, we have to keep in mind, this particular juror was an alternate. He was not a part of the deliberations. But there is a concern here that, again, you may recall when the judge gave the marching orders to the actual jury that did the deliberations, he says, remember, what happens in the jury room stays in the jury room. That's not necessarily true. Juries are able to do interviews, as you saw, after this. But none of the actual jurors that were a part of the verdict have done an interview. They did speak out anonymously in a statement. I can play you that audio as well from the news report.
Morning, a juror from the Sean Diddy Combs trial requesting to remain anonymous, slamming the notion that the music mogul's celebrity profile drove their decision. In a statement to ABC News saying, "I found that statement highly insulting and belittling to the jury and the deliberation process," adding, "Our decision was based solely on the evidence presented and how the law is stated. We would have treated any defendant in the same manner regardless of who they are." The jury of 8 men and 4 women acquitted the rap titan of the most severe charges of sex trafficking and racketeering, but convicted him on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution as it relates to ex-girlfriends Cassie Ventura and the woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane.
We shall see if this matters. Based on what we've seen so far from the actual jury, they've been really respectful. Could they be working on other interviews or deals or whatever it may be? Possibly. But based on that statement, it seems as if the actual jury has a lot more integrity than the alternate that we saw on CNN. Guys, I want to know your reaction to what this juror had to say and what our friends over at Inner City Press are saying in regards to some misrepresentation during jury selection. Will it matter? Does it matter? Guys, let's continue this conversation in the comment section. As always, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on breaking news when we go live or when we upload. Thanks for watching.
Here we go now.